Now, in the eyes of many Russians, the late Wagner Chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has died a hero's death. It has been close to 24 hours since Russia's investigative agency confirmed the Wagner Chief's death in the August 23rd plane crash. While Prigozhin's demise is mourned by the mercenary group supporters, clouds loom on what his death means for Vladimir Putin and even Russia. The Wagner Chief's rise to power over the years is no secret, and neither is his close association with Vladimir Putin. But the mercenaries' short-lived mutiny in June pitted him against his now former ally, and many say it was only a matter of time before the Wagner chief met his fate. The unexplained plane crash, which killed Prigozhin and Wagner co-founder Dmitry Utkin, has raised eyebrows the world over. Many global leaders, including the US President Joe Biden and former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, have pointed fingers at Putin, alleging that the Wagner chief was bumped off. But will Prigozhin's death strengthen or even weaken Putin or his regime? That is the question many are seeking an answer to. Several reports reveal a Western expert view that if the Russian president did in fact order his once trusted allies' killing, it puts Putin in a stronger position for the near future. Prigozhin's alleged assassination sends out a clear message that nobody is untouchable, not even a feared leader of a mercenary group. However, in the long run, there is a concern that Putin's regime is not unbreakable. The Wagner chief's mutiny against the state's defense forces just 2 months ago is a testament to that. The march to Moscow may have been short-lived, but Prigozhin had publicly, on several occasions, revealed ugly truths about the Russia-Ukraine war and the state machinery. Vladimir Putin's global position stands on murky ground too. An arrest warrant in his name has severely restricted the Russian leader's travel and diplomacy. Last week, Putin attended the BRICS summit virtually. He will also not be physically participating at the upcoming G20 summit. Not to mention, the Russian economy is bearing the brunt of the war, primarily because of international sanctions on the country. But that's not all. Most security experts doubt whether the Wagner group can survive without Prigozhin. These questions become louder and more prominent after Putin ordered the mercenary soldiers to sign an oath of allegiance to the state. Several media reports say that there are already calls for revenge for Prigozhin's death in ultra-nationalist chat rooms. The developments and wave of support for the Wagner chief beg the larger question: is Putin unstoppable, or are cracks now visible in the once impenetrable regime? Fred Weir is a journalist and also a political commentator, and he's now joining us live from Moscow. Fred, good to see you, and thank you very much for making time for WION World is One. Speculations are still spreading across the world of President Putin's involvement in the death of Prigozhin. What's the Kremlin saying right now? What are the murmurs in Russia following this development?
Well, there are no answers to that question. Prigozhin had a lot of enemies, and the Russian system is one in which there are a lot of players. Putin isn't a dictator in the sense that he controls everything from the top down. He more or less runs a state that has many parts, many moving parts, and he is the supreme arbiter. And in this situation, which I think shocks a lot of Russians, he may or may not have played a role in Prigozhin's demise, but he probably does stand to benefit from it. The Wagners were on the way out anyway. They had been removed from the front line in Ukraine. That in fact they were ordered to leave Bakhmut, where after they won that battle, and to disband from at least from their Ukrainian operations. That was probably what prompted the mutiny. Prigozhin did not accept that. He was brought to heel by the deal, and there was a big question about how he would continue, because he not only had those operations in Ukraine, he had them in Africa, in Syria, And he also established a base in Belarus where he was
Fred,
training.
we'll talk about the operations of Wagner in several countries a little bit later, but I just want to know from you, now that you've said that there'll be no foreseeable impact during his death, when Putin ordered Wagner fighters to sign an oath of allegiance, what was the significance of that, and what do you make of the timing of Putin's decree?
Well, he did order them to disband back in May after they declared victory in Bakhmut. They were removed from the front lines and sent to camps in Luhansk region, and they were told that they had to disband that army. It was like 25,000 men, and those who wanted to remain in service had to sign contracts with the defense ministry. Others who didn't want to could go home, and others who wanted to stay with Prigozhin could go to Belarus. And about 4,000 of them did end up in Belarus with Prigozhin. So that was all done and down, and that removed this mercenary army from the front lines in Ukraine, and as a contender with the defense ministry. Now the front line, 1,000 kilometers in Ukraine, is all 100% controlled by the defense ministry. So in that sense, the Russian state machine has been greatly strengthened.
Fred, in brief and finally, in essence, what would be the impact of Wagner not having a vocal leader like Prigozhin? Will their operation be affected in Belarus or in all the countries that they are present in?
You know, I asked this question of a lot of Russian experts, and I think the consensus is that Wagner, this whole idea of having mercenaries, freelancers, even if they were sort of working for the interests of the state, is a bad idea, turned into a loose cannon. And I think the idea now is that Wagners may go on, they may continue, but they will be put under a much tougher state control in those operations in Africa, and they have quite a few of them would be maybe continuing, but there would be much more Kremlin or government control over what they do and who they are, what they do, and who leads them.
All right, I've been talking to journalist and political commentator Fred Weir. Fred, thank you very much for your insights and for talking to WION World is One today.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.